Hey everybody, welcome to today's video. Today's video is going to be all about parenting and the influencing that parenting has on your mental health. I'm the psychology student bringing you the 2 cents from my lectures, my textbooks, my conversations with profs. I pay the big bucks and spend the big time so you don't have to. Now look, we all know that parents have a big impact on us, but we underplay the magnitude of that impact on our mental health. Oftentimes we hear certain things like, look, maybe the dad was out of the picture, or maybe the mom wasn't as loving as she could have been, or she was discouraging. What's really important to understand is this. When you are a child, the first role models in your life were your parents. They become this idealized figure that is greater than just another human being. Their mom, their dad, they're always right. They are my protectors. And if they say I'm the problem, that means I'm the problem. Or so a young person thinks. And unfortunately, what happens to people is we can't choose our parents. And what are parents? They're two people with unique personalities that have come together and that have chosen to have kids. Now, the trouble becomes when parents aren't fully invested in their children, they're not there, they are absent, or they are so bad, they are so neglectful, they are so abusive that child prays that they were absent. And it's hard to comprehend what that means until you met an individual that goes, Daniel, I wish my father wasn't in my life. If you saw him when I was younger, you would think that too. See, at some point, kids start to look at their parents differently. The hypothesis is around the teen mark, 13, 14, 15, you start to think about the world differently. You start to challenge some of these views that you've adopted as a kid. It's mom and dad's always right. The problem is that the impacts and the effects that your parents have on you, whether it's physical abuse, whether it's emotional abuse, whether it's shaming, guilting, bullying, discouraging, talking down to, those things that have an impact. And what ends up happening is you have a lot of kids who come from these broken homes who have scars, who have injuries, physical or psychological. And they carry those around with them. Not only that, they carry those injuries into other relationships. If you look at something called attachment styles, it won't be the video for today because it's such a big topic, you can do a video in and of itself. It speaks a lot about how the influence of parents will lead an individual to act in their romantic relationships in regards of who's going to be clingy, who's going to be trustworthy and confident, who's going to avoid conflict, who's going to overly compromise, who's going to agree easily, who might be a hothead and yell. So if you're interested in this topic, definitely YouTube videos on attachment styles, which connects parenting and how people are attached versus how those same people operate in romantic relationships. Let's imagine you're an unfortunate, poor angel who was raised in an unhealthy environment, where you were discouraged, when you were talked down to, an environment where you were shamed, an environment where you felt guilty, where you didn't feel loved, you didn't feel appreciated, you didn't feel supported. When dad came home, you didn't feel happy. You felt worried. You felt stressed. You felt tense. Oh my God, dad's going to come home. Who's he going to yell at this time? Those dishes better be clean in the sink, or else what's dad going to do? So do we begin to associate dad coming into the room with happiness and love, or with fear and resentment? And the problem is you have a young individual who has a certain upbringing, which involves all those things I've mentioned earlier: abuse, neglect, betrayal, shame, and they remember those things. Now you look at an individual like that, and it's very easy in our society to look at that person and go, look, you have to move on. That stuff happened in the past. But folks, it doesn't matter if it happened 1 year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. If we carry those things with us, and it's not a conscious choice to, my friends, welcome to repressed memories. Welcome to psychological trauma. One of the defense mechanisms that our brain uses without us knowing necessarily is it says, I don't want to think about this. because if I think about it, it brings pain. And I want to minimize the pain and suffering as much as possible, so I just won't think about it. The problem is, you just take a rain check and you don't actually deal with whatever it is. You've got this box of sorrow and sadness and resentment, and you don't ever open it up, you just put it on a shelf. That's why Freud noted 100 years ago, he said, look, you've got people who are coming to my office who have trauma from 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. This idea that time heals all wounds, no it doesn't. No it doesn't. This idea that you're just going to forgive over time, why would you? If you're still angry about it, why would you? Because it's the right thing to do. Well, what if you're still angry? What if you're still angry at that individual? Is it right to forgive? If you look at someone in the eyes and say, I forgive you, but deep down you're angry and you're just doing it because you think it's the right thing to do, does that make you a liar? Are you being genuine in your forgiveness? So imagine you're this young person and you're living with two individuals who you do not enjoy, who you do not love, who are harmful to you. And you think to yourself, 13, 14, 15, you go, I need to get out of here. I don't feel safe. I don't feel happy. I don't feel comfortable. The stress and the mental health toll is way too much. The problem is when you're 14, when you're 15, you don't have many options for moving out. If you don't have other family to live with, your parents are your guardians essentially until you're an identified adult in your state or in your province. So you tell yourself, when I turn 18, the first thing I want to do is I want to move out. So I can live under someone else's roof, so I'm away from that. There's an old saying that says, my house, my problems. Not my house, not my problems. I can't change this behavior that's being exhibited towards me. But what I can do is focus on my own actions. I have this idea that, look, if someone makes you feel a certain way, if someone says something harmful to you, if someone says something upsetting, if someone says something anxiety-provoking, if someone says something that makes you feel frustrated, you're not responsible for feeling frustrated. Does that make sense? I made a video way back when talking about, oh, we're in control of our own emotions, and maybe I was a little unclear. That doesn't mean if someone makes you feel angry that you made yourself angry. No, no, no. What I mean is, if someone does something and you feel hurt, you feel pain, you feel sad, you're not responsible for that. What you are responsible for is how you respond. If someone makes you angry and you shout, that's on you. Or if you choose to walk away, if you choose to relax and try to de-escalate the situation, that's on you. So if someone makes you feel a certain way, it's not your fault. If someone says something that makes you upset, it's not because you're overly sensitive. If someone says something that makes you feel annoyed, it's not because you're intolerant of having a discussion. It's not your fault. But how you respond is absolutely your responsibility. That is on you. You can control that. Again, is it with yelling? Is it with avoidance? Is it with discussion? Is it with compliance? So you're a 14, 15-year-old kid and you're saying, I need to leave. I don't feel happy here. I see the way my friends talk to their parents and it's different. When I'm at my friend's house and his dad's coming home, my friend is actually happy to see his dad. That's strange. When I hear my dad coming, I get scared and I get anxious. And you see his heart rate increase and his breathing becomes irregular because he's associated dad with yelling, with anger, with being tense. So the moment that door starts to open, guess what? That guy gets tensed up. Or that girl gets tensed up. Because eventually it just becomes carved into your brain. It becomes hardwired. If you're interested in this, look up Ivan Pavlov, look up classical conditioning and operant conditioning. It was really interesting about consequences to our behavior, positive reinforcement, looking at punishment. And essentially what happens is if you do something and you follow it up with something else, eventually your brain links the two together. If every time you hear the door open at 6 to 7 p.m., it's followed by your dad yelling, guess what? When that kid hears that the doorknob turning, the heart rate starts increasing. The breathing becomes oh God, dad's here. The brain goes into a fight or flight mode. Should I hide? Should I run? Should I hide? Should I run? Is there anything to clean? Oh God, is there anything to clean? Guess what happens? That girl who's 14 is now 24. And if she hasn't gone to counseling, and if she hasn't talked to someone about this, her boyfriend goes out to get groceries. He comes back around 6 to 7 p.m. As soon as she hears that doorknob, guess what happens? Her brain, from all those years of fight or flight, the heart rate increases. She starts to get anxious. She starts to get nervous. Oh my God, why do I feel like this? I feel sick to my stomach. Why do I feel like this? It's John. I love John. John's my partner. Why do I feel scared? You feel scared because the cues that you're getting are the same cues you got before your father came home and put his hands on you. And your brain, in trying to keep you safe, it can't differentiate that this is another individual. It's the old saying of, be careful of bleeding on people who didn't cut you. Think about that for a moment. Be careful about bleeding on people who didn't cut you. Now, I'm not saying it's voluntary. I really think you need counseling to kind of unwire those associations that your brain has made. Because it takes a very long time to try to change these defense mechanisms that your brain has created to make you ready for a fight or for a flight or to run away or to hide. So now you're a grown adult, you're talking to your boyfriend, to your partner, and those same habits come up. So you're a kid, or you're 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, the first chance you get, you move out, right? Because maybe your parents say something like, well, look, this is our house, this is our rules. You're going to be home by 8. If you don't do your homework, we're going to put our hands on you. These are the things we're going to do. Shut up. You're a kid, you're lazy anyways, you take us for granted, all you do is sit around, you're not good enough, your grades aren't good enough, you're dumb, you're lazy. And that's your parents, folks. That's not just a stranger telling you that. So the kid's sitting there psychologically thinking, wait, why would my parents say that? Are they right? Well, am I actually all those things? Those are my parents, right? Why would they say something that's wrong? Think about all that baggage that young person carries. They get 18, they move out. They go to their own apartment. They get their own house. They leave the city. They leave the country. They cut off almost all communication. No phone calls, no emails. And guess what happens? The kid has moved out. Now really sit back and this is all going to come together. Listen to this. The parents reach out. And they go, hey, bud, it's been a while. Come over for Christmas time. And the kid says, no. I don't think I will. I'm not coming over for Christmas. And they go, why not? Because maybe they're oblivious. And the kid responds, he goes, I'm not comfortable at home. I do not want to be around you. And the parents go, well, that's ridiculous. Well, why are you uncomfortable? Why wouldn't you want to be around us? Because I feel unsafe when I'm around you. Because I don't like the way you treated me, and you made me feel terrible. You're not people that I want to spend time with. But that was so long ago. That was 5, 10, 15 years ago. Why are you still holding on to that? Well, I'm still hurting in the present. It's still making me upset right now. And then maybe the parents say, well, look, we're sorry. To which the kid replies, when exactly did you start feeling sorry? Is it right now? Was it during the abuse, during the neglect? There's a really good video about, I forgot what it was called. I watched a lot of his YouTube name is called Healthy Gamer, GG. If you've seen him, you already know how brilliant he is. He's a psychiatrist who makes a bunch of videos about a plethora of different topics. And what I just told you was an example that he gave. I forgot what the name of the video was because I watched so many of his. But it was tied to this idea of like, look, you can only do so much when you're an adolescent. And then when you move out, now, you can choose not to put yourself in that environment. And the example that I just gave you was his, in that they go, look, Why don't you want to come? Well, because I feel uncomfortable. I don't want to come. I don't enjoy being around you. Oh, come on, that was so long ago. You were a kid when all that stuff happened. It's been years. Well, I'm still hurting in the present. Like, that might be ancient history for you, but when I think about that, I feel angry. So it means I haven't let it go. I'm still mad at you. And if I'm mad at you, if I'm actively mad at you, I literally can't forgive you. It'd be lying if I forgave you. Now the question is, where do you go from here? Do you have to forgive? Well, Daniel, of course you do. They're your parents. Do you have to forgive? Folks, when you hear some of the horrific stories that I've heard of what parents treat their own kids, have to is a very strong word. Even should you. Everybody should forgive their parents. It's the right thing to do. Are you sure about that? What if you're not in a place to forgive? What if you're not ready to forgive? What if your parents don't admit that they did anything wrong and they blame you? What if they say you're the one who needs to apologize? Where do we go from here? Unfortunately, I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and I said, it'd be interesting if a child could sue their parents for emotional damage. But I said, even that wouldn't be enough, and it wouldn't be right, because it would make you think that money would fix the situation. You know how they imprison someone wrongfully, let's say for a murder that they did not commit. They go to jail for 10, 15, 20 years. They come out, they sue the state. They win some odd millions of dollars. That money's never going to bring your time back. It's never going to make up for whatever the heck happened in prison, whatever your inmates did to you. So now you have this individual who, and it's so heartbreaking because you only get two parents. And look, you got stepmothers, stepfathers, other people in their step-siblings. But to begin with, from whenever a child starts to have memory and remember, oh, okay, these are the first, when I think of dad, this was the first person in my life, mom, this was the first person in my life, you leave a huge impact. And let's say the dad leaves the picture, now you have a stepfather. That first dad, if the kid still remembers him, has a huge impact on the kid and how he will relate to the stepfather. Because everything the stepfather does, he'll compare back to his original dad. And without consciously knowing it, it'll be a comparative nature. Oh, when my dad came home, he did this. When Steve came home, he did this. When I asked dad for money, he said this, but Steve, mom's new boyfriend, is super open-minded with spending money on me. So kids remember that stuff. And people will say things like, oh, he'll be fine. He's a child. Kids are resilient. What are you talking about? What do you mean kids are resilient? Maybe kids just don't understand at that moment what's happening. But I promise you they'll grow up and they will understand. And when an individual looks at the two people that are supposed to protect them, the two people that are his or her role models, and that's the first act of betrayal, how can that individual go on to trust anybody else in their life? Now you have that young girl who's becoming a mom, or that young guy who's becoming a dad. He knows, at least he knows what not to do. There's a lot of guys out there who say, look, my dad had a temper. My dad shouted and he yelled all the time. I don't want to be that guy. So I know what not to do when I'm being a dad. If there's one thing that I want you to take away from this video, from this talk, is this. Our actions have repercussions. The way we speak, the way we act towards our coworkers, our employers, our friends, strangers on the street, but especially children. Especially children. They don't forget this stuff, folks. And look, there's forgiveness and there's mistakes and people get mad. You have ups and downs. But I don't think we truly realize, as a society, how heavy the burden of trauma and neglect is. How it doesn't just get solved with going to therapy once. How it's not just a thing where, oh, your parents were bad to you when you were 10, well, you're 20 now, so you should be over it. It's not that simple. It's not that simple. if there's one thing I could say is just keep that in mind. Hold that thought in your head. Entertain that idea. The next time you hear about abusive parents, someone having a terrible childhood, don't be so easy to go, dude, that was 10 years ago, forget about it. You have to look at the psychological implications of that. What does that mean, you had abusive parents? Okay, that means the people who you trusted most in this world hurt you. Okay, how does that impact your relationships going forward? When you get mad at someone, you're going to have a tendency to yell, because that's how things got resolved in your household. Whoever yelled the longest and the loudest won the argument. Okay, so when you get into an argument with your girlfriend, you're going to yell. And if that doesn't work, you're going to put your hands on her. Those are the psychological implications. I hope this video was able to shed a little bit of light on an extremely complex subject that has so many different factors involved, so many different layers. If you want to look at the biological side of it, what it does to the brain, what it does to hormones and desensitizing certain areas. Definitely this isn't my first video on the topic, and it won't be my last video on the topic. If you enjoyed this stuff, save the podcast, follow this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're listening to me. Thank you so much. I hope you appreciated it. I hope it was educational. Take care, everybody, and stay safe.